Good morning, and again, welcome to our first um, online service of 2021. I hope that you all had a peaceful Christmas and obviously a happy new year to each and every one of you. I know it was so different for all of us, and I can only begin to imagine how we felt as a family, so I can only imagine how you guys also felt. Our reading today comes from Ecclesiastes and Luke's Gospel, and the Ecclesiastes one really starts off quite you can always tell a Scotsman apparently because they're far from being rays of sunshine, although I don't believe that's true. However, do you sometimes feel like the writer of Ecclesiastes? Does it ever seem to you that your life is caught up in a never ending cycle? You get up in the morning, as you always do, you get set to start your work, be it that you are at work or you're working from home. School, well, of course, that's going to be online learning for just now. But you're always doing what you always do, nothing changes. And when you're done with one project, there is already another one in the pipeline waiting for you. Now, I often have that in the church that we do one thing, but there's a whole multitude of other aspects that needs to be done. In Greek mythology, there is a story about Sisyphus, whom the gods appointed to spend his entire life to roll a heavy boulder up a mountain, only to roll it over and over and over again. And when he got up to that mountain and went down the other side, he had to go back and start the process. That was his existence. Over and over again. And I think we all face times where we feel like Sisyphus or the writer of Ecclesiastes, when we feel that we are so insignificant. We're a little cog in the machinery of society. And in the end, nothing really changes. None of what we say or do matters. And nothing that we as individuals do makes a lasting difference. And the question at the root of the writer of Ecclesiastes' musings is an existential human one. We want to know if our lives really make a difference. Do we make a difference on this planet? Does it really matter how we live? Do our toils, our care, our service, do they really matter? Do they make an impression? Do they make a difference? Will one generation come after the other, repeating the same mistakes? Is there an ultimate reason and a purpose for our existence in this world? Is there a purpose for your life and for my life? So here we are at the beginning of a new year again, and it's interesting to see those questions, that passage from Ecclesiastes, question the purpose of life. It seems to be raised just by the mere fact of the calendar turning from the 31st of December to the 1st of January, and of course for this Sunday, the 10th. I don't know, and I don't have to tell you about New Year resolutions. We're all familiar with them. Besides, they're always such elusive personal goals that we set ourselves: lose weight. And by this time next year, I'm going to be 5 and 6 stone lighter, or I'm going to learn a language, or I'm not going to eat chocolate again, a bit like what we do at Lent in some traditions. We tend to do New Year resolutions for self-betterment. Some people say I'm going to go to church when it starts back again, and now that I've been connected online. But it's always that promise on the 1st of January that usually fades by the 4th or the 5th. Well, With people I know, it's usually by the 4th at the very latest. What's interesting about the turn of the calendar is usually actually human, it's rather arbitrary, it's a man-made milestone. In about 46 BC before Christ, Julius Caesar introduced the first calendar that was solar based and officially instituted the 1st of January as the beginning of the new year. However, in 567, the Council of Tours abolished January the 1st as the beginning of the year because the celebrations were often accompanying what was considered to be pagan and unchristian. And so at various times and places throughout medieval Christian Europe, the New Year was celebrated on December 25th, the birth of Jesus, March the 1st, March the 25th, the Feast of Annunciation and Easter, and so on. And it was when we adopted the Gregorian calendar, they restored the January the 1st as New Year's Day. And although most Catholic churches adopted the Gregorian calendar, it was only really gradually accepted by the Protestant countries. The British Empire, for example, did not accept the whole Reformed calendar until around 1752, if my research is correct. And don't hold me to these dates because it's a bit like the views on the vaccine, that there are so many different alternatives. This is what I'm going for. Until the then British Empire and their colonies, and especially in America, New Year was celebrated in March. But I wonder how God looks at our New Year celebrations. I wonder how Jesus celebrated the New Year. In the Hebrew tradition, during Jesus' time, there was a feast for at least 4 days of the year when they were celebrations. The date which was most prominent was the first month of the festival year, which is Nisan. The 15th of Nisan is the start of the festival of Pesach, Passover, corresponding to the full moon of Nisan. All very technical, and you've really got to understand it. And I'm going to put my hands up and say I don't get it all. And the observation of the Nisan as the first month of the year was also biblically referenced date according to Exodus in chapter 12 verse 2. This month during the Exodus, is to be for you the first month of your year. And even though that Jesus must have been familiar with the Roman celebration of January the 1st, as Judea being an occupied province of Rome, it was more likely that he and his family and community celebrated the Passover as the beginning of a new year. There are several biblical explanations and accounts of what Jesus did at that time of year. Interestingly, all those instances are spiritually significant and for thus some of us theologically significant as well. The boy Jesus in the temple debating with his priests and his lawyers as the first New Year's account of Jesus. Even as a young teenager, we find Jesus not at the New Year's party, not watching the fireworks, not with his family. We find him in the temple talking about God. And other events in Jesus' life around Passover time include the temple cleansing and, of course, what we all know as the Last Supper. And in these accounts, Jesus was focusing on the spiritual aspects of life at the beginning of each respective year. The temple cleansing gives us some insight into Jesus' feelings about the commercialism that crept into the holy days of the time. He became angry enough to drive the merchants out of the temple. In many ways, I think it would make sense for us as Christian folks to celebrate Easter as the beginning of the new year, especially in light of the third account of Jesus' New Year celebration, the Last Supper. And it's during this event when Jesus had a farewell Passover meal with his 12 disciples in that upper room that he revealed God's plan, not just for a new year, but for a new era. He called it the New Covenant, sealed with the shedding of his own blood and celebrated in communion by churches everywhere throughout the world. At his New Year celebration, Jesus chose to focus on what matters most, on things eternal and things that bring true and lasting fulfillment, spiritual fulfillment. He spoke to us on God's kingdom, and the work had already started within us. He spoke to us on opening our eyes to find God at work, even in the darkest of times. And he spoke to us on keeping the concerns of this world out of the spiritual realm. He spoke to us on finding meaning and fulfillment in his teachings and in his sacrifice. He spoke these to us. So at the beginning of a new year, as we are now, maybe you should ask yourself, where do I spend most of my life? I know what you might be tempted to say just now, at home. And perhaps that is true. We sleep at home, generally. We eat at home with our families if we're fortunate and blessed. But where do we spend most of our time in life? Preoccupied with trying to better ourselves with unachievable targets? Or are we perhaps with people but not really with people? Or are we sometimes sitting in a church sanctuary with a gathered church for worship, but really not there in heart and in commitment and in mind, spiritually open and ready? So this first service of January 2021, let's not concentrate on things that are out with our control. That's like Cepheus endlessly rolling that stone up that hill. That's the kind of thing that the writer of Ecclesiastes is talking about when he says, all things are futile and nothing ever changes. Do you want to make a real difference in your life? Do you want to make a real difference in this world? Then follow Jesus. Follow his example and focus on the spiritual things in your life. Things like your family. Things like finding joy and peace with those annoying habits that your family do because you're fortunate and blessed to have a family. Finding joy and finding communion in and with God. Things like praying. Really praying for other people's needs. Things like reading and learning about the Holy Scriptures. Things like serving others in humility, spreading love and blessing others. And believe it or not, these are the things that will leave a mark, that will make us feel fulfilled and give our lives real and lasting purpose. And so finally, I know it's 10 days late, but from us at Knightswood Congregational Church, a happy new year to each and every one of you. May you stay safe, may you be healthy, and may you be happy. Amen.